This is Getting Answers, Western Mass News.
Good Sunday morning. Hope you're having a good weekend. Welcome to Western Mass News Getting Answers, where each week we focus on issues and events in Western Massachusetts with the newsmakers and people who are making a difference. This week we welcome Jay Sefton back to the program. Now, Jay is the co-author of Unreconciled. He brings to the stage over a dozen characters from his past to retell the true story of his 13-year-old self, who was cast as Jesus in a school passion play directed by the local parish priest who would sexually abuse him during rehearsals. The brutally honest solo performance chronicles the adult Jay's journey to confront his past and navigate a Catholic Church reparation program. Jay, always good to see you.
You as well. Thanks
Welcome
for
back.
having me. Thank you.
It's been about a year
Yeah.
when you were last year. It was not long after you had done a production of Unreconciled at the Majestic Theater in Springfield.
Yes. Yeah, and you were kind enough to host the panel discussions afterwards.
I mean, to me, absolutely, the play itself is fascinating, but what those discussions do afterwards, we'll talk more about that.
Yeah.
But I would talk about the future, the present, and the future, and you are presenting Unreconciled this Saturday night at 7 o'clock at the Academy of Music.
Yes. Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, the Academy of Music in Northampton is about the best venue that's amazing.
It really is a beautiful theater.
And I'm so thrilled to have a chance to do this show on that stage. We were driving by the other night and saw it up on the lights, up on the marquee, and it's like, oof, this is happening.
Big time.
Yeah, yeah.
It's, well, obviously, you've taken it all over the world, too. But now, again, after the performance on Saturday, you're going to host a post-show panel. Who's going to be joining you for that Q&A?
So we are thrilled to welcome Bessel van der Kolk, who wrote The Body Keeps the Score, which is pretty much the foremost textbook on trauma. And it's the textbook that I read in graduate school when I went back to get my degree in psychology and was trying to figure out a way to blend theater and psychology. And so his work has informed mine a lot, and then Leisha Skye, who co-founded the Trauma Research Foundation. So they're both going to join us for a discussion about trauma and the arts and creative expression as a means of healing.
I know the big part of this, too, is the discussion, obviously, with the panelists, but also getting the audience involved, too. What have you learned through these Q&A sessions?
They have organically developed over the years. So we're about 3 years ago when we did the first workshop production at Chester Theater. Yeah. And what we've learned is people want to talk about this, but not sure how to start the conversation. Sure. The play has developed as a jumping off point for these conversations that are hard to have. And people have stories and they want to tell them. And they want to find a way to break that ice and have a difficult conversation. And we hope that the play is that jumping off point.
Well, I think a big part of that, too, is they're watching you on stage, telling your story, this true story. And it almost like a release for them, too. It's like, all right, if he can do this on stage, I can do this in a conversation.
I think so. And there's a lot of humor in the play. There's a lot of lightness in the play. There's a lot of hope in the play. And I think that goes a long way to empowering people to, okay, it doesn't have to be it's a heavy topic. Sure. It's a dark topic, but we can tell our stories with some humor and some lightness too.
You have to get the message across.
Yeah.
Do you make changes or refinements to Unreconciled after staging, learning the audience reaction?
Well, the audience reaction is the audience is the other scene partner, and each audience is a little bit different. So it is going out there and seeing who's here tonight. It's the beautiful thing of theater. It's different every night. Now, the structure stays the same, and the script pretty much stays the same unless something happens, somebody's cell phone goes off, people come in late, sure. So I'll mess around with that. But generally speaking, the script and the structure remain the same, and then we play within that structure of who's here tonight and what kind of show is this? And I love that exploration.
Do you find more often than not in your audience there are people who have been sexually abused by priests?
By priests?
Or just sexually abused?
Yeah, so the research shows us that 1 in 6 men and 1 in 3 women have had some sort of unwanted sexual experience from childhood. So you do the numbers on any given audience. Somebody has had an experience or a loved one who's had an experience. So these, yeah, the audiences are, and then specifically about clergy abuse, those folks are starting to find us as we do the play more and more. And so, yeah, often we'll have people come up and share their stories in private or, yeah.
And I mean, even though for you, it hasn't been all that long ago when all of this happened to you, that was back in a day and time where you didn't talk about it.
Yeah.
You kept it to yourself. Well, these people in the priest, they were untouchable.
Absolutely untouchable. I mean, it's one of the great things about that I have gratitude for about Massachusetts. It's really that watershed Boston Globe Spotlight series from 2002 that blew this thing completely open and set the stage for, like, I wouldn't be able to tell my story had that not happened. I wouldn't be on a stage.
Well, the thing is, too, we find just a couple of weeks ago here in the Springfield diocese against allegations against two bishops from this diocese. Here we are, your story about 35, 40 years later, and we're still hearing these stories. That to me, I find the most troubling part. As you look at it, you know, is the church doing enough to help victims and to deal with this problem? Because it just seems it's there.
Are they doing enough? I don't think that they're doing enough, right? Like the Vatican still hasn't adopted a zero tolerance policy. That would probably go a long way to say, like, hey, we have zero tolerance about childhood sexual abuse, and it's confusing as to why that seems to be a stance that they won't take on that high up. And then I also think, you know, there's lobbying wings of the Catholic Church that get involved in politics and throw their money behind legislators and legislation that protect them rather than protect children. I think that's got to stop. Sometimes, you know, a judgment will be made, and certain dioceses will use bankruptcy laws to avoid paying or to drag it out. I think that's got to stop. So I think some things have changed, but I think some things still need to change.
You know, as we look at Unreconciled too, you take on almost a dozen characters in that range, and just go from one to the other, and it's with lightning speed. It's just
thanks.
But by the end of the play, I think we all realize that this is just as much your father's story as he takes on the Catholic Church of Pennsylvania and battles with his own guilt.
Yeah, and that was something that organically also evolved over the writing of the play. Mark Basquill, who's the co-author, him and I worked for about 1.5 years on the script, and you know, I remember watching my dad's character just kind of continue to rise and rise, and while other characters were getting cut away, because you have to. The first version was 2 hours and 45 minutes long. I was like, this one is thankfully 80 minutes long, and my dad's story just continued, and I enjoy playing him so much. I miss my dad.
Did he ever get to see the play?
No. He died in 2012, and so 2023 was our first, our first production. But it kind of tickles me that he's somewhat in the play. You know what I mean? From
he lives on through that.
Yeah.
Now, I know efforts to bring Unreconciled to Broadway are building momentum. This is really, really exciting. I understand there will be an off-Broadway premiere in the spring?
Yes. So we'll be at La Mama Theater in the East Village in March. And, 3 years ago when you set out to do the thing, I still have a hard time with the Broadway word, but it has been brought up, and this is going to be off Broadway, and it's been a wild ride for 3 years, and the fact that, like, we're going to get to go to Manhattan and have a real run and see what follows is terrifically exciting.
I mean, it's the same play that people will see this Saturday at the Academy of Music.
Yes, yeah. We'll have. Every venue has a little bit of different tech stuff to it, but it's going to be the same play.
What's the biggest venue you've presented on Unreconciled now?
Well, the Academy by far will be the biggest one. Other than that, there was we did Capitol Rep in Albany. That's 305, but we didn't sell the 305 out. But that was the biggest venue.
Yeah.
I did a church in Cincinnati a couple weeks ago. That was kind of cool. That was a pretty big venue.
That must have been. Was it strange?
It was very weird. Yeah.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about bringing it home.
I'm up on an altar, doing the play with projections, projecting behind me of an altar where the play from the play. It was real meta and real weird and kind of wonderful.
Now, did the diocese invite you to do it there, or was it?
So this was part of the Cincinnati Fringe Festival, and it was a Lutheran church that is one of the venues they use in the Fringe Festival. Yeah. Well, when they saw this play coming in, they were like, I think we've got the right venue for this play. So it was very cool to have the audience be in the pews, and yeah.
Wow. I can't imagine looking out and see. It's like, it must bring memories of the Passion Play.
Yeah, because, churches, even if they're Lutheran, Catholic, whatever, they have a similar smell and feel to them. And, I'm backstage waiting to go on, and I'm in their sacristy, which is where, it was intense.
All right. On that note, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Jay and I are going to talk about how Unreconciled is received in other countries. Stay with us. Welcome back. My guest this week is actor and playwright Jay Sefton. Jay, you've performed Unreconciled for audiences in a number of cities in this country. We're just talking about Cincinnati and overseas in Ireland. What's the reaction been to audiences there?
Again, it's a little different in each city. We've been in Belfast twice, Northern Ireland, and Galway once, and we were doing the talkback, and a guy in Galway said, because in Ireland and Northern Ireland, there was an intensity to the talkbacks that they're here, but it was different there. There felt like there was an urgency to them. And a guy said, I don't know that you understand coming from the United States. He said, the United States is so big, and there are so many influences on everyday life, but here, this is the influence. And he said, so this has, affected everybody in Ireland. And that made me think, it's intense there.
And when you think, too, it's not just a problem going out in this country, it's all around the world.
Yes.
But especially a Catholic country like Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah, and it seems like, everywhere there's an investigation, things get uncovered. And I think, early on, there was like, oh, this is a United States problem. I've read some stuff recently where people in the Vatican were like, well, geez, that's a shame what's going on in the United States. And then, like you said, you start to peel it back.
And if there's anything I found about the Irish, is they are not afraid to let you know what they think.
Yes.
At all.
No, yeah. And those conversations, thinking of one particularly in Belfast in October, felt like they could have gone on for hours, and at some point we do have to put it, but boy, they felt like they could have kept going. Well, you wonder with them too,
do these folks have that kind of an opportunity with a play like Unreconciled to be able to talk about it openly? Probably not very often.
Maybe not very often, and we've said along the way, it's 3 years of performing it now that it's not easy to say, yes, I want to go see a solo show about clergy abuse. So, I always have a lot of respect for the people that do show up to see it, because it's easier to do something else with your weekend. But, we try and create a complete theatrical experience, so people are happy that they've come.
Yeah. It's more than just the subject. It's all the different characters that have touched your life.
Yeah.
Especially your dad.
Yeah.
I know in September you're bringing Unreconciled to the UK.
Yes.
To Great Britain, and then back to Ireland in October and November.
Yeah. We have 2 shows, theaters, Dublin and just outside of Dublin. And then we're going to be in Bradford, which is in northern England, an organization called Survivors West Yorkshire are bringing us there, and we're going to do the theater there, and so
What an experience. And I know you performed, we talked about this last time, Unreconciled in Philadelphia, where many of your 8th grade classmates were in attendance, and their reaction to it too.
Yeah, so last time we talked, it was a one-off performance at University of Pennsylvania. Well, since then, we were just back there in April, and we performed it 5 times at the bar that I grew up going to that's just up the street from the church. And this was part of a documentary that's most of principal photography is done. It was about bringing it back to Havertown where I grew up, and it was amazing. The bar we made it seat about 70 people. And these shows were filled with classmates and their family members. And, you know, I'd come out and look and just see people that are in the show. I've changed names and stuff, but they're all there. And it was amazing. You know, it had this feeling, somebody described it as a communal healing, because you got the real sense that this was, that the trauma happens in a community. It's a communal trauma as
Sharing
well.
your healing process with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And giving them a chance to talk about the thing, because I think what happens is, you know, everybody presses on. Nobody stops and has like a discussion about, hey, what was it that just happened? What happened in the 1980s here? And, you know, it plays out in the Philadelphia Inquirer, and they know stuff, and things get whispered. But the opportunity to sit with everybody in a room and talk about it.
And they got involved in the conversation,
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, in a big way.
Wow, I can't imagine what that was like. Talk about bringing it home.
Yes, yeah. It was fascinating, and it changed, to your point about does it change based on the audience? It changed the way I played the show.
It did.
A lot. Yeah, there are some stories in there where, like, I play them out, but to look out and see some family members of the people that I'm talking about, that
We're
shifts.
part of it,
yeah, that shifts how I'm doing it.
Well, I can't imagine. All right, Jay, we'll take another break. When we come back, Jay and I are going to talk about the Unreconciled project. Stay with us. Back for my last few minutes with actor and playwright Jay Sefton. Jay, in our last few minutes, I want to take some time to talk about and remind folks about the Unreconciled project, where you work to empower survivors of childhood sexual abuse, reclaim their voices through storytelling.
Yeah.
Let's talk more about that and how that works and how people can get involved.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks for bringing it up. So this is a nonprofit 501c3 that my wife Melanie and I started about a year ago. And it was born out of what we're talking about here, that these conversations need to be had, right? Like the stuff, abuse gets worse in silence, and so how do we find a way to talk about it? And the play is the jumping off point, but we also, you know, it helps us produce the play and bring the panel discussions wherever we go. And then I'll run peer support groups. You know,
Part of what you do, part of your work.
Yeah. So I'm a licensed mental health counselor, and, like, you know, when we went to Los Angeles, we're at a 2-week run there. I run some support groups while we're there, and we're also doing writing workshops. The day after, so what is that, July 26th?
Yep.
Melanie and I are going to run a generative writing workshop for people to come in and work their stories, and this is open to anyone. And so we're rolling out writing workshops, creative workshops. This creative process is an amazingly therapeutic one that, you know, I started writing this show in rage, and it has turned into a joyful act. And, you know, I don't quite know how to make sense of that, but that's what we're trying to do with the Unreconciled project, is help people go through the same creative process in telling their stories.
Well, I think, too, part of that is the people who you are helping. And I'm sure after the play and when people stay for the talkback and everything else, you hear from them what you've done for them.
I do hear from them, like, what it means to see somebody putting their story on stage, to open up these conversations. And, you know, people will reach out over email, and people will come up after the show, and we'll talk. And it's been probably the most fulfilling and gratifying and surprising piece of this whole journey.
Well, I think the whole part of that, too, is that everybody handles it differently. But you've taken it easy. I'm not going to run and hide. I'm going to tell my story, and we're going to help as many people as we can by doing that. That you can do that.
Yeah, and you know, early on, it was the thought, can I just write something?
Yeah.
And it may never get produced. It may never see a stage. And then you know, so this has been kind of wild to watch it unfold for these 3 years, and then to have the Unreconciled project be a piece of it is.
We're almost out of time, but
Yeah.
I want to remind folks about Saturday night, the 25th, the performance at Unreconciled at the Academy of Music. How do folks get tickets?
You can go to unreconciledtheplay.com. On that site, you'll be able to get tickets. You'll also be able to find out more about Unreconciled Project, and if you want to get involved in any way, that'll be on there. But unreconciledtheplay.com.
Now, if they want to take part in the workshop on the next day on Sunday, where's that happening?
That is happening at the Hawley Street in Northampton at the Art Center in Hawley Street.
Sure, okay, yep.
And so that's 10 to 1, and they can also sign up on the website there. But yes, so that'll be on the Sunday from 10 to 1.
Jay, I can't thank you enough for being here and for what you've done and what you continue to do. And I will have you back again to talk more about this, because I think this is, as we said, this is a subject that's not going away, and we have to keep it out there and talk about it.
Well, thank you, and thank you for bringing light to the subject and bringing me on here today.
Always good to see you, my
You
friend.
too.
Good luck on Saturday night at the Academy of Music in Northampton. My thanks to Jay Sefton for being with us this week, and of course you for watching. I'm Dave Batson. See you next week for Getting Answers.